What if I told you that 90% of the energy you are using right now to think, to feel, to keep your heart beating in this very moment comes from an organism that is not entirely you, a biological passenger living inside your cells by the trillions, carrying its own DNA, its own ancient code, its own memory of a world that existed long before anything human ever drew breath. These microscopic engines once powered bodies that could run for days without stopping, that could heal wounds in hours, that could thrive in conditions that would destroy us. So why, in the most advanced age in human history, are these same engines flickering, fading, and failing inside of you? They are called mitochondria. But tonight, we will call them by a truer name, the masters of light and breath, because that is what they do. They take the oxygen you inhale and the light encoded in the food you consume, and they transform it into the raw electrical force that animates your entire existence. They are not mere components of your biology. They are gatekeepers, ancient sentinels of a vitality so profound it has survived extinction events, ice ages, and the slow grinding of continents across the face of the earth. Billions of years of unbroken fire, passed from mother to child, from cell to cell, all the way through the darkness of deep time, to burn quietly inside you tonight. But that fire has been dimmed, choked by blue light and cortisol, smothered by chemicals your ancestors never encountered, starved by rhythms your body was never built to follow. And so you feel it, that heaviness that no amount of caffeine can lift, that fog that no amount of sleep seems to clear. Tonight, we change that. Tonight, we are not merely resting, we are performing a system reset. Over the next 2 hours, we will reach back through the layers of modern interference and make contact with the original power source buried in your cells. We will wake what has been forced to sleep. We will restore what the modern world has suppressed. So let everything fall away now. The day, the noise, the weight of a world that moves too fast for your ancient biology. Let your body become still and feel yourself descending past skin, past muscle, past bone, down into the microscopic furnace at the center of your own being. This is where your energy was born. This is where we begin. Close your eyes and imagine the earth as it once was. Not the green and blue jewel you have seen in photographs, but something older, something almost unrecognizable. A world without birdsong, without forests, without the faintest whisper of anything you would call alive in the way you understand life today. Picture a planet wrapped in haze, its oceans thick with iron, its skies tinged with the faint amber glow of a younger sun. This was Earth 1.5 billion years ago, and beneath the surface of those ancient, restless waters, something was about to happen that would change the trajectory of existence forever. Something so quiet, so impossibly small, that no eye would ever witness it. And yet, without it, you would not be here. Your heart would never beat. Your mind would never form a single thought. You would simply not exist. In those primordial oceans, life had already been stirring for over 1 billion years, but it was simple, unimaginably simple. Single cells drifting through the deep, feeding on chemicals, dividing, surviving. They had no ambition, no direction, no plan. They were alive, yes, but only in the most elementary sense of the word. They existed the way a flame exists, burning what was available, persisting as long as conditions allowed, and nothing more. These were the archaea and the earliest bacteria, and for an almost incomprehensible stretch of time, this was all life would ever be. Small, solitary, silent. But among these drifting cells, two very different kinds of life were moving through the same dark waters. The first was larger, a primitive cell with a soft, flexible membrane capable of engulfing smaller organisms to feed itself. It was a predator of the microscopic world, surviving by consuming others. The second was something extraordinary, a small, specialized bacterium that had evolved a remarkable talent, a kind of biological alchemy. It could take oxygen, a gas that was toxic to most life at the time, and use it to generate enormous amounts of energy. While the rest of the microbial world ran on slow, inefficient chemistry, this tiny organism had discovered how to harness the most powerful fuel source the planet had ever produced. It was, in every sense, a living engine. Now, picture the moment. Somewhere in that ancient ocean, the larger cell encountered the smaller one, and it did what it had always done. It reached out, enveloped the bacterium, and pulled it inside. This was supposed to be a meal, a simple act of consumption, repeated trillions of times across billions of years by countless hungry cells. The smaller organism should have been dissolved, broken apart, absorbed into nothing. But that is not what happened. Something went wrong, or perhaps something went impossibly, miraculously right. The small bacterium was not destroyed. It survived inside its captor. It continued to breathe. It continued to burn oxygen and produce energy. And the larger cell, instead of rejecting this foreign presence, began to use that energy. It began to thrive in ways it never had before. This was not a conquest. It was not parasitism. It was the birth of a partnership so profound, so enduring, that it would outlast continents, survive mass extinctions, and persist unbroken through every generation of every complex living thing that would ever walk, swim, fly, or think on this planet. This event, this singular, silent accident in the deep waters of a young Earth, is what science calls endosymbiosis. And it is the reason you are alive tonight. Let that settle into you for a moment. Everything you are, everything you have ever felt or thought or dreamed traces back to that one encounter. A hungry cell that swallowed a stranger and discovered not food, but a partner. An alliance was formed in the darkness of an ancient ocean, and it has never been broken, not once, not in 1.5 billion years. The small bacterium that survived inside that first host cell is what we now call the mitochondrion. And here is where the story becomes deeply, almost hauntingly personal. Because those mitochondria did not simply become part of the cell, they retained something of their own identity. To this day, after all this time, mitochondria carry their own DNA, their own genetic code, separate from yours, distinct from the nucleus of every cell in your body. When scientists first discovered this, it was startling. It meant that inside every human cell, there are 2 different genomes, 2 different genetic lineages coexisting. One belongs to you, inherited from both your parents, shaped by the long history of your human ancestry. The other belongs to the mitochondria, and it tells a far older story, a story that predates humanity. That predates mammals. That predates the first fish, the first worm, the first multicellular organism of any kind. Mitochondrial DNA is a living fossil, a biological ghost of that ancient free-swimming bacterium, still carrying echoes of a life it lived over 1 billion years before your species even existed. And this ghost passes from mother to child, only from mother to child. Your mitochondrial DNA came from your mother, hers came from her mother, and so on, in an unbroken chain of maternal inheritance stretching back through every generation of human life, and beyond that, through every generation of every complex organism, all the way to that original moment of engulfment in the deep. When you breathe tonight, when you feel the slow rhythm of air filling your lungs, you are feeding organisms inside your cells, whose lineage is older than any mountain on this planet, older than the continents themselves. You carry inside you a living record of the most ancient partnership in the history of life on Earth. Think about what this means. You are not a single organism. You have never been a single organism. You are a collaboration, a symbiosis, a merger of two fundamentally different forms of life that found in each other something neither could achieve alone. The larger cell provided shelter, nutrients, and a stable environment. The mitochondria provided something even more valuable. They provided fire, not literal fire, but something remarkably close. Inside every mitochondrion, even now, as you listen to these words, a process is unfolding that mirrors combustion at a molecular scale. Oxygen is being consumed. Electrons are cascading down chains of ancient proteins, and from this cascade, a molecule called ATP is being forged, the universal currency of biological energy. Every flicker of thought in your brain, every contraction of your heart, every signal sent along every nerve in your body is powered by ATP. And ATP is made by your mitochondria, by the descendants of that ancient bacterium, by the living engines inside your cells. This is the unspoken contract, the silent agreement that has governed your biology since before biology as you know it existed. You provide them with oxygen and the raw materials of life. They provide you with the energy to exist. Every second of every day, without pause, without rest, this exchange continues. You have never lived a moment without it. You have never drawn a breath that was not, in part, drawn for them. And they have never stopped working, never stopped burning, never stopped generating the spark that keeps you alive. It is the most successful partnership in the history of the universe, not between nations, not between species, between two forms of life so different they might as well have come from separate worlds, bound together in an embrace so total that neither can survive without the other. And it was this partnership, this fusion of two biological worlds, that made everything else possible. Before endosymbiosis, life was trapped in simplicity. Single cells could survive, but they could not grow. They could not specialize. They could not organize into anything larger than themselves because they simply did not have the energy. Building complexity requires power, enormous amounts of it, and the slow, inefficient chemistry of the ancient world could not provide enough. But when mitochondria entered the picture, everything changed. Suddenly, a single cell had access to an energy source orders of magnitude greater than anything that had come before. It was as if a world that had only known candlelight was suddenly flooded with the power of an internal sun, and that is exactly what mitochondria became. internal suns, thousands of them in every cell, burning oxygen, radiating energy, illuminating the biological darkness that had kept life small and simple for over 1 billion years. With this new power, cells could grow larger. They could begin to cooperate, forming colonies, then tissues, then organs. They could specialize, some cells becoming muscle, others becoming nerve, others becoming bone, each drawing from the mitochondrial furnace, the specific energy it needed to perform its unique function. The entire architecture of complex life, from the first multicellular organism to the human brain, was built on the foundation of mitochondrial energy. Without these internal suns, there would be no animals. No plants as you know them, no fungi, no consciousness, no love, no memory, no dreams. The entire cathedral of complex life rests on the fire provided by an organism that was swallowed and never released. Consider the enormity of that. Every creature you have ever seen, from the smallest insect to the largest whale, carries mitochondria. Every bird that has ever taken flight was lifted by mitochondrial energy. Every eye that has ever opened was powered by the same ancient engine that first ignited in the belly of a primitive cell in a sunless ocean. And when you look at another human being, when you see the light in their eyes and the warmth in their skin, you are seeing the visible evidence of trillions of mitochondria burning in concert, sustaining a fire that has not gone out in 1.5 billion years. You are never alone in your own body. You have never been alone. From the moment you were conceived, you were already a partnership, already a collaboration between your human cells and the ancient organisms within them. They do not think, they do not feel, but they remember, in the only way biology can remember, through structure, through function, through the unbroken repetition of a process refined across deep time. They remember how to turn breath into power. They remember how to keep you alive. And this brings us to something that matters deeply tonight. Because if mitochondria are the engines of all complex life, then the quality of your existence, the depth of your energy, the clarity of your mind, the resilience of your body, all of it depends on the health and vitality of these ancient passengers. When they burn brightly, you feel it. You feel it as strength, as focus, as that rare and precious state where your body and mind seem to move as one, effortlessly, powerfully. There was a time when human beings knew this feeling intimately. They did not have a name for it. They did not need one. It was simply the way they existed, fueled by mitochondria that functioned exactly as they were designed to, unimpeded, uncompromised, burning clean and hot like the internal suns they were meant to be. Those who came before you carried the same mitochondrial machinery you carry now, the same electron transport chains, the same ancient proteins, the same fundamental architecture of energy production passed down through an unbroken maternal line that connects you to the very first complex cells. But they lived in a world that honored that architecture. They moved with the rhythms of the sun. They consumed what the earth provided without alteration. They rested in true darkness and rose with genuine light. Their mitochondria operated in the environment those organelles had spent billions of years adapting to. And the result was a kind of energy we have almost forgotten is possible. An energy that did not arrive in desperate surges or collapse in sudden crashes. An energy that was deep and steady and enduring, like a river fed by an underground spring that never runs dry. It was this energy that carried them across frozen landscapes, that kept their hearts beating through long nights of vigilance, that powered the endurance to hunt, to build, to protect, to survive against forces that would seem impossible to us now. That energy is not gone. It is not lost. It is encoded in the ancient DNA of organisms that have survived every catastrophe this planet has ever known. They survived the Great Oxidation Event. They survived Snowball Earth. They survived the asteroid that ended the Age of Giants. And they are here, right now, inside you, waiting, carrying within them the same capacity for power that once made your ancestors extraordinary. The same fire that has burned without interruption since the first cell swallowed the first engine in the deep waters of a world you will never see, but whose legacy you carry in every breath you take tonight. Think back to a world before this one. Not a world of mythology or fantasy, but a real, physical world that existed for hundreds of thousands of years before the first city was ever built. A world where your direct ancestors, carrying the exact same biology you carry tonight, lived and moved and endured in ways that would seem almost superhuman by the standards of the life you know. Picture them, not as primitive, not as lesser, but as finely tuned instruments of survival, shaped by millions of years of relentless pressure into the most energy-efficient organisms the planet had ever produced. Their muscles were dense and responsive. Their senses were sharp beyond anything you have experienced. Their capacity to focus, to endure, to push through exhaustion and still function with clarity and precision was not a matter of willpower. It was a matter of biology. It was a matter of mitochondria. Every cell in their bodies hummed with the same organelles that exist inside you right now, the same internal suns, the same ancient engines forged from that primordial partnership over 1 billion years before they were born. But there was a critical difference. Their mitochondria were operating in the world those organelles were built for, and the result was a level of sustained, resilient energy that most modern humans have never once felt in their entire lives. Consider what their days looked like. They rose with the sun, not because of discipline, not because of an alarm, but because their biology was woven into the rhythm of the planet itself. The first light of morning entered their eyes and triggered a cascade of molecular signals that reached all the way down into their cells, into their mitochondria, telling those engines to ignite, to increase output, to prepare the body for the demands of the day ahead. This was not a gentle suggestion. It was a deep, ancient command, encoded over billions of years of evolution on a planet that rotated with absolute consistency. Light meant activity. Darkness meant repair. And their mitochondria knew the difference with a precision that no clock, no schedule, no artificial system could ever replicate. Then they moved. Not in the controlled, repetitive way of a modern gymnasium, but in the fluid, unpredictable way of creatures navigating a living landscape. They walked for hours across uneven terrain, their muscles constantly adjusting, their cardiovascular systems working in a low, sustained rhythm that sent a steady stream of oxygen to their mitochondria. They climbed, they carried, they sprinted in short, explosive bursts when danger appeared or opportunity presented itself. And then they rested, deeply, completely, in a stillness so total that their bodies could direct every ounce of available energy toward repair, regeneration, and the strengthening of the very systems that had been challenged during the day. This is the principle that modern science has only recently begun to understand and has given a name that sounds clinical but describes something profoundly ancient: hormesis, hormetic stress. The idea that certain kinds of challenge, applied in the right doses and followed by adequate recovery, do not weaken biological systems. They strengthen them. They force adaptation. They compel the body to build itself back stronger, more efficient, more resilient than before. And nowhere is this principle more visible than in the mitochondria. When your ancestors faced the cold, and they faced it often, their mitochondria responded by increasing their capacity for heat production. When they faced hunger, and periods without food were a regular part of their existence, their mitochondria shifted into a state of heightened efficiency, learning to extract more energy from less fuel, clearing out damaged components through a process we now call mitophagy, and emerging from the fast leaner and more powerful than before. When they exerted themselves physically, pushing their bodies to the edge of their capacity to chase, to flee, to build, to climb, their mitochondria responded by multiplying, by growing in number, by increasing the density of their energy-producing machinery so that the next demand could be met with even greater force. Every challenge was a signal. Every hardship was an instruction. And the mitochondria listened, and they adapted, and they grew stronger with each cycle of stress and recovery. This was not suffering for its own sake. This was the language of biology. The conversation between an organism and its environment that had been ongoing since the first complex cell discovered it could thrive by pushing against the boundaries of its own limitations. Your ancestors did not know the word mitochondria. They did not understand the molecular details of oxidative phosphorylation or the electron transport chain, but they lived in a way that spoke directly to those processes, that honored the deep evolutionary programming of their cellular engines. And the result was a kind of power that resonates through the fossil record and the oral traditions and the surviving evidence of what those bodies could accomplish. Think about what they endured. Think about the hunters who tracked large animals across open savanna for days, not hours, days, maintaining a steady pace under a burning sun until their prey collapsed from exhaustion. This is not legend. This is documented human capability, a strategy called persistence hunting, and it required a level of sustained aerobic output that most modern athletes cannot maintain for more than a few hours. Their mitochondria fueled every step, every heartbeat, every decision made under the haze of fatigue, processed by a brain that refused to shut down because its cellular engines were so well conditioned, so deeply adapted to sustained effort, that they could maintain output long after any modern body would have surrendered. Think about the navigators who crossed open ocean in wooden vessels, reading the stars and the currents and the behavior of birds with a focus and cognitive clarity that required their brains to function at peak capacity for days without rest. The human brain consumes roughly 20% of the body's total energy, and nearly all of that energy comes from mitochondria. The mental feats of your ancestors, their ability to hold complex maps in memory, to make life or death decisions under extreme pressure, to maintain awareness and judgment through sleep deprivation and physical hardship, all of this was underwritten by mitochondria that had been forged in the crucible of hormetic stress and tempered by the rhythms of the natural world. Think about the mothers who carried children through migrations that spanned continents, who nursed and protected new life while their own bodies were taxed to the limit, and who did so with a biological resilience that ensured not only their survival, but the survival of every generation that followed, including the one that eventually produced you. The mitochondria in their cells were the silent engine of that endurance. And because mitochondrial DNA passes exclusively through the maternal line, those same engines, refined by millennia of extraordinary demand, are the direct ancestors of the mitochondria inside your cells tonight. This is the hidden legacy. This is the inheritance that no one told you about. You carry inside you the genetic machinery of the elite survivors of the human story. Not the ones who had it easy. Not the ones who were sheltered from challenge. The ones who faced ice ages and droughts and predators and starvation and emerged not merely alive, but stronger. Their mitochondria were tested by the most demanding conditions this planet could produce, and they passed every test. And the descendants of those mitochondria are inside you right now, carrying the same capacity for resilience, the same blueprint for extraordinary energy production, the same potential for the kind of sustained vitality that once defined what it meant to be human. But here is what matters most. That blueprint is not active, not fully, not in the way it was designed to be, because a blueprint requires the right signals to be read. A furnace requires the right fuel to burn. And the signals and the fuel that your mitochondria evolved to expect, the signals they received without interruption for hundreds of thousands of years of human existence, have been systematically replaced by something else entirely. Your ancestors lived under the open sky. You live under fluorescent tubes and LED screens that emit a spectrum of light your mitochondria do not recognize as natural. Your ancestors moved through landscapes that demanded constant physical engagement. You sit in chairs for hours, your muscles dormant, your circulation sluggish, sending your mitochondria the signal that energy production can be reduced because demand is low. Your ancestors ate when food was available, in rhythms dictated by season and scarcity, giving their mitochondria regular periods of fasting that triggered repair and renewal. You eat constantly, flooding your cells with fuel they cannot process fast enough, creating a backlog of metabolic byproducts that damage the very engines responsible for converting that fuel into usable power. Your ancestors experienced cold, real cold, the kind that forced their mitochondria to activate thermogenic pathways that are now almost entirely dormant in the modern body. Your ancestors experienced silence, true silence, the kind that allowed their nervous systems to shift into states of deep recovery, signaling their mitochondria to begin the slow, meticulous work of cellular repair that can only happen in the absence of stimulation. You live in a world of perpetual noise, perpetual light, perpetual input, and your mitochondria, those ancient engines that thrived on the rhythm of challenge and recovery, of effort and stillness, of demand and deep rest, are drowning in a signal they were never built to interpret. The machinery is still there. Every protein, every membrane, every electron carrier in the chain that converts oxygen into the energy of life. It is all still there, exactly as it was in the bodies of those who crossed oceans and survived winters and built the foundations of everything we now call civilization. The hardware has not changed, but the operating environment has changed so dramatically, so rapidly, in what amounts to the blink of an eye on the evolutionary timescale, that your mitochondria are caught in a kind of biological confusion. They are receiving signals that contradict their programming. They are being asked to function in conditions they were never designed for. And the cost of that confusion is something you feel every single day, even if you have never had a name for it. It is the fog that settles over your mind by mid-afternoon, the heaviness in your limbs that no amount of coffee fully lifts, the strange, persistent sense that your body is capable of more, that somewhere beneath the fatigue there is a reservoir of energy you can almost feel but cannot quite access. You are right, it is there. It has always been there, waiting in the ancient architecture of organelles that remember a different world, a world of fire and starlight and silence, a world where the engines ran hot and clean and never faltered. But something has changed in the world around those engines. Something that happened so quickly and so completely that your biology has had no time to adapt. And it is in that widening gap between what your mitochondria were built for and the world they now inhabit that the great energy crisis of the modern human has taken root, quietly, invisibly, in the flickering furnace at the center of every cell you carry. Imagine a city at night, a vast, sprawling metropolis seen from above, millions of lights burning in an intricate web of energy that stretches to the horizon. Every street lamp, every window, every signal tower pulsing with electricity, all of it fed by a network of power stations working in concert to keep the city alive. Now, imagine that something begins to go wrong. Not a blackout, not a sudden, dramatic failure where everything goes dark at once. Something more subtle, more insidious. The lights begin to dim. Not all of them, and not all at once, but slowly, district by district, the glow weakens. Street lamps that once burned bright now flicker with a yellowish haze. Hospitals find their equipment running at reduced capacity. The systems that keep the city safe, its surveillance, its emergency response, its communication networks, begin to lag, to stutter, to miss critical signals. The city is still functioning, but it is functioning at a fraction of its potential, caught in a state engineers call a brownout, where there is not enough power to meet demand, and the grid must make impossible choices about what to keep running and what to let fade. This is what is happening inside your body right now, not in the wires and circuits of a city, but in the mitochondria of your cells. The internal suns that have powered complex life for over 1 billion years are dimming, not because they are broken, not because they have reached the end of their lifespan, but because they are being overwhelmed by signals they were never designed to process, fueled by substances they cannot efficiently burn, and asked to operate in an environment so foreign to their evolutionary programming that they have begun to shut down non-essential functions just to survive. You are living through a biological brownout, and the symptoms of that brownout are so widespread, so normalized, so deeply woven into the fabric of modern existence that most people have stopped recognizing them as symptoms at all. They simply call it life. Let us trace the architecture of this dimming. Let us follow the signals from the outside world down into the microscopic furnace of your cells and understand with precision and clarity exactly how the modern world is draining the ancient engines you carry inside you. It begins with light. Not all light, not the broad, dynamic spectrum of the sun that your mitochondria have spent billions of years calibrating themselves to, but a specific, artificial frequency that has flooded the human environment in the span of a single generation. Blue light, the cold, intense wavelength emitted by every screen you own, by the LED fixtures in your ceiling, by the devices you hold inches from your face for hours each day. Your mitochondria are exquisitely sensitive to light. They evolved in a world where the spectrum of visible light changed in predictable patterns, shifting from the warm, red-enriched tones of dawn and dusk to the broad, full-spectrum brightness of midday and back again. These shifts were not decorative. They were instructions, biological commands that told your mitochondria when to ramp up energy production, when to shift toward repair, when to activate the deep regenerative processes that could only occur in darkness. Blue light, in nature, existed primarily at the peak of the day, a signal for maximum output, maximum alertness, maximum energy expenditure. It was always temporary, always followed by the warm, fading light of evening and the total darkness of night. But in your world, blue light never stops. It pours into your eyes at midnight. It saturates your environment during the hours your mitochondria expect darkness and silence. And because your cellular engines cannot distinguish between the blue light of a midday sun and the blue light of a phone screen at 2 in the morning, they receive a command that makes no biological sense. Stay alert. Keep producing. Do not shift into repair mode. The result is a kind of cellular confusion, a disruption of the ancient rhythm that has governed mitochondrial function since long before humans existed. Your engines are being told to run at peak output during the hours they were designed to rebuild themselves. And over time, this relentless, contradictory signal begins to degrade the very machinery that keeps you alive. But light is only the beginning. Consider what follows you through every waking hour, and increasingly into the hours that should belong to sleep. Noise, not the sound of wind or water or the distant call of another living creature, but the constant, layered, inescapable noise of the digital world. Notifications, alerts, the low hum of information that never stops arriving, demanding to be processed, evaluated, and responded to. Every one of these inputs, no matter how small, no matter how trivial it seems, triggers a response in your nervous system. A micro-activation, a tiny surge of alertness that ripples through your body and reaches your cells as a chemical signal. Cortisol, adrenaline, the molecular language of vigilance. And your mitochondria respond to these signals the way they were designed to. They shift resources, they redirect energy away from long-term maintenance and toward immediate readiness. Because in the world they evolved for, a stress signal meant danger. It meant a predator, a threat, a situation that required every available unit of energy to be channeled into survival. The response was meant to be brief, explosive, followed by a long period of calm in which the mitochondria could replenish what was spent and repair what was damaged. But in your world, the signal never stops. The danger never passes. Your mitochondria exist in a state of perpetual low-grade emergency, constantly diverting energy from repair to readiness, from healing to vigilance, from the slow, essential work of cellular maintenance to the urgent, depleting work of keeping you alert in a world that never stops demanding your attention. This is the unseen drain, the hidden cost of connectivity, of convenience, of a world designed to keep you engaged at all times. Your brain alone, that magnificent organ that consumes roughly 1/5 of your body's total energy, is locked in a state of chronic hyperactivation, processing more information in a single day than your ancestors encountered in a month. And every fragment of that processing is paid for in mitochondrial currency. Every notification, every scroll, every anxious thought triggered by a headline you did not ask to see, all of it is drawn from the same energy reserves that should be powering your immune system, repairing your tissues, consolidating your memories during sleep, and maintaining the structural integrity of the cells that keep you alive. And then there is the fuel itself. Your mitochondria are precision instruments. They evolved to process specific kinds of energy derived from whole, unprocessed foods that changed with the seasons, that arrived in irregular intervals, that required significant physical effort to obtain. The fats, the proteins, the complex carbohydrates that your ancestors consumed were delivered to the mitochondria in forms those organelles recognized and could metabolize efficiently, cleanly, with minimal waste. But the fuel you provide them now is something else entirely. Processed sugars that flood the system faster than the mitochondria can handle, creating a bottleneck in the electron transport chain that results in the leakage of reactive oxygen species, unstable molecules that damage the very membranes and proteins the mitochondria need to function. Seed oils and synthetic fats that alter the composition of mitochondrial membranes, making them less fluid, less responsive, less capable of the precise molecular interactions that energy production depends on. Chemical additives and preservatives that your mitochondria have no evolutionary framework for processing, substances that accumulate in the cellular environment, like debris in an engine that was designed for clean fuel and is now choking on contamination. This is the biological brownout in its full architecture. Light that lies to your cells about what time it is. Noise that keeps your mitochondria locked in emergency mode. Fuel that clogs and damages the very machinery responsible for converting it into usable power. And beneath all of this, a deeper mechanism is at work. Something that researchers have identified as the cell danger response. When mitochondria are subjected to sustained, unresolvable stress, they do not simply slow down. They actively change their behavior. They shift from energy production to defense. They begin releasing signaling molecules that trigger inflammation, not the acute, purposeful inflammation of a healing wound, but a low-grade, systemic, chronic inflammation that smolders in the background of your biology like embers that never fully go out. This is not malfunction. This is protection. Your mitochondria are doing exactly what they were designed to do when they detect a threat they cannot overcome. They are battening down the hatches, reducing output, diverting resources to survival at the expense of performance. The cell danger response is a survival mechanism, ancient and effective, designed for a world where threats were temporary and recovery was inevitable. But in the modern world, the triggers for this response never cease. The blue light continues, the noise continues, the contaminated fuel continues. And so the cell danger response continues, day after day, month after month, year after year, keeping your mitochondria locked in a defensive posture that was only ever meant to last hours or days. The energy that should be flowing to your brain, your muscles, your immune system, your capacity for deep thought and emotional resilience is instead being consumed by a chronic state of biological defense. And what you feel, that bone-deep exhaustion that sleep does not cure, that fog that descends over your thinking, that sense of being perpetually drained without ever having done enough to justify the fatigue, is not weakness. It is not laziness. It is not a character flaw. It is the lived experience of a biological brownout. The feeling of a body whose ancient engines have been forced into survival mode by a world that never gives them permission to stand down. But here is what you must understand, and what makes tonight different from every other night you have spent trapped in this cycle. The brownout is not permanent. The cell danger response is not a one-way street. It is a protective mechanism, and like all protective mechanisms, it can be reversed when the threat is removed and the right signals are restored. Your mitochondria are not damaged beyond repair. They are waiting for the signals that tell them it is safe to shift from defense back to production, from survival back to vitality, from the low, flickering output of a system under siege to the full, radiant power of engines running as they were designed to run. And the pathway back to that power runs deeper than you might imagine, deeper than chemistry, deeper than the molecular machinery you can see under a microscope. Because inside your mitochondria, at the very heart of the energy-producing process, something extraordinary is happening. Something that operates not by the classical rules of biology, but by the strange, almost mystical laws of a realm that science is only beginning to explore. In the electron transport chains of your mitochondria, particles are moving in ways that should be impossible. Electrons are not simply flowing from one protein to the next, like water through a pipe. They are tunneling, passing through barriers they do not have the energy to cross by any classical measure, appearing on the other side as if they had briefly ceased to exist in one place and materialized in another. This is not metaphor. This is not poetry. This is quantum mechanics, operating at the very foundation of your biology, in the engines that keep you alive. And it is in this quantum realm, in the ghost-like movement of electrons through the ancient architecture of your cells, that the deepest secrets of your energy and the key to reclaiming it are waiting to be understood. We have traveled deep tonight, from the ancient oceans where life first discovered partnership, through the vast landscapes where your ancestors moved with a power we have nearly forgotten, and into the dimming grid of the modern body, where ancient engines struggle under signals they were never built to receive. But now, we go deeper still, deeper than chemistry, deeper than the molecular machinery that textbooks describe in neat, predictable diagrams. We are about to enter a realm where the rules you think you understand about how the physical world works begin to dissolve, where particles behave in ways that should be impossible, where the boundary between science and what can only be described as magic becomes so thin it almost disappears. We are going into the quantum heart of your mitochondria, and what happens there will change the way you understand what you are. Everything you have learned about biology, about your body, about how life sustains itself, has been framed in the language of chemistry. Molecules interact, bonds form and break, enzymes catalyze reactions. It is a mechanical picture, elegant and useful, but fundamentally built on the assumption that the microscopic world inside your cells obeys the same intuitive rules as the visible world around you. Things move from one place to another by traveling through the space between. Energy transfers follow predictable pathways. Cause leads to effect in a linear, orderly chain. This is classical physics applied to biology, and for decades it was considered sufficient to explain everything that happens inside a living cell. It is not sufficient. It is not even close. Deep inside your mitochondria, in the final and most critical stage of energy production, something is occurring that classical physics cannot explain. Something that, when it was first proposed, was met with skepticism and resistance from the scientific establishment because it seemed too strange, too improbable, too fundamentally alien to belong in the warm, wet, chaotic environment of a living cell. Electrons, the subatomic particles that carry the charge your mitochondria use to forge the energy molecule ATP, are not simply moving along the electron transport chain the way current flows through a wire. They are tunneling. They are encountering barriers, protein walls and molecular gaps that they do not possess enough energy to cross by any classical measure, and they are appearing on the other side, instantaneously, without ever existing in the space between, as if they briefly ceased to be particles at all and became something more like a probability, a ghost, a whisper of charge that dissolved in one location and materialized in another without traversing the distance in between. This is quantum tunneling, and it is happening inside you right now, in every cell, in every mitochondrion, trillions of times per second. As you listen to these words, as your heart beats and your lungs draw breath, and your brain processes the meaning of this sentence, electrons are performing an act that defies the most basic intuitions of the physical world. They are teleporting through solid barriers to create the energy that keeps you alive. Let the strangeness of that settle into you. You are not merely a chemical machine. You are a quantum machine, the very foundation of your energy, the process without which your heart would stop and your consciousness would dissolve into nothing, depends on a phenomenon so deeply counterintuitive that even the physicists who first described it struggled to accept its implications. And yet, it is real, it is measurable, it is happening in the electron transport chains of your mitochondria with a speed and reliability that no human technology has ever come close to matching. Picture the electron transport chain, not as a diagram in a textbook, but as it truly is, a series of enormous protein complexes, 4 of them, embedded in the inner membrane of the mitochondrion, like ancient monuments rising from a landscape of lipid and water. Each complex is a masterpiece of molecular architecture, assembled from thousands of atoms arranged with a precision that borders on the incomprehensible. And between these complexes, electrons move. But they do not move the way you move through a room, stepping across the floor from one point to another. They move the way light moves, the way a thought moves. They flicker from one complex to the next in quantum leaps, so fast that the word speed loses its meaning. There is no journey. There is no travel. There is only here, and then, there, a particle existing at one point in the chain, and then, without crossing the space between, existing at the next. It is a dance performed at the edge of reality itself, where matter behaves less like substance and more like music, less like something you can hold and more like something you can only feel. And with each of these quantum leaps, something extraordinary happens. The energy released by the electron's passage is used to pump protons, hydrogen ions, across the inner mitochondrial membrane, creating a gradient, a reservoir of potential energy that builds and builds like water rising behind a dam. And when that gradient reaches a critical threshold, the protons flow back through a molecular turbine called ATP synthase, a rotating engine so small that millions of them could fit on the head of a pin. And as they flow, this turbine spins, and with each rotation, it forges a molecule of ATP, the universal currency of life, the spark behind every thought you have ever had, every emotion you have ever felt, every movement your body has ever made. Born from the ghostly passage of electrons through barriers they should not be able to cross, in a process that operates at the intersection of biology and the deepest laws of physics. But the strangeness does not end with tunneling. Because for quantum tunneling to work with the extraordinary efficiency it displays in your mitochondria, something else must be happening, something even more remarkable. The proteins in the electron transport chain, the molecular environment surrounding them, the water molecules and lipid membranes and cofactors that make up the inner landscape of the mitochondrion, all of it must be vibrating in a state of coherence. Quantum coherence, a condition where the components of a system are not behaving independently, as classical physics would predict in a warm, noisy, biological environment, but are instead oscillating in phase, in harmony, like an orchestra where every instrument is perfectly synchronized to a frequency that no conductor has called. This coherence is what allows the electrons to find their path with such impossible precision. It is what allows them to tunnel through barriers at exactly the right moment, to arrive at exactly the right protein complex, to release exactly the right amount of energy, to drive the proton pumps that power your life. In the sterile, near absolute zero temperatures of a physics laboratory, quantum coherence is difficult to maintain. The slightest thermal noise, the faintest vibration from the surrounding environment can destroy it. And yet here, inside your mitochondria, in a biological environment that is warm, wet, and teeming with molecular motion, quantum coherence persists. It persists because your mitochondria, shaped by over 1 billion years of evolutionary refinement, have found a way to use the very noise and vibration that should destroy coherence to sustain it. The thermal energy of the cell, the constant jostling of water molecules, the vibrational modes of the protein structures themselves, all of it has been harnessed, tuned, integrated into a system where chaos becomes order and noise becomes signal. Your mitochondria are not fighting the laws of physics. They are exploiting them at a level of sophistication that human engineering has not yet learned to approach. You are, in the most literal sense, powered by stardust performing magic. The electrons that tunnel through your mitochondrial complexes were forged in the hearts of dying stars, billions of years before this planet formed. The hydrogen protons that spin the turbines of ATP synthase are among the most ancient particles in the universe, born in the first moments after the beginning of everything. And the quantum laws that govern their behavior inside your cells are the same laws that govern the behavior of particles in the cores of stars, in the hearts of black holes, in the fabric of space-time itself. When you breathe, when you think, when you feel the warmth of your own body against the cool of the night air, you are experiencing the direct, tangible result of quantum mechanics operating in real time inside a biological system that has spent over 1 billion years learning to dance with the deepest forces in the universe. This is what you are, not merely flesh and blood, not merely a collection of chemical reactions following predictable rules. You are a quantum organism, a being whose most fundamental life process depends on the behavior of particles at the boundary between existence and non-existence, between being in one place and being in another, between the solid world you can touch and the probabilistic world that underlies everything you have ever known. The energy in your muscles, the electricity in your nerves, the thoughts forming in your mind at this very moment. All of it traces back to electrons ghosting through protein barriers in the inner membrane of organelles that were once free-living bacteria in an ancient sea. And here is where this understanding becomes not just fascinating, but urgent. Because the efficiency of this quantum process, the precision of the tunneling, the stability of the coherence, the fidelity of the entire electron transport chain is not fixed. It is not a constant that remains the same regardless of conditions. It is exquisitely sensitive to the composition of the mitochondrial membrane, which is altered by the fats you consume, sensitive to the availability of the specific cofactors and minerals that serve as electron carriers, molecules like CoQ10 and iron-sulfur clusters that must be present in precise concentrations for tunneling to occur with optimal efficiency. Sensitive to the structural integrity of the protein complexes themselves, which can be damaged by the reactive oxygen species that leak from a stressed and overburdened transport chain. Sensitive, above all, to the overall state of the mitochondrion, whether it is operating in a condition of healthy, well-maintained vitality or struggling under the accumulated damage of chronic stress, poor fuel, and relentless, unresolved activation. When the quantum machinery of your mitochondria is functioning at its peak, electrons tunnel with breathtaking efficiency. Energy production is clean, abundant, and precise. The proton gradient builds smoothly. ATP synthase spins without interruption. And the result is a body and mind that operate with a clarity and power that feels almost effortless. But when that machinery is degraded, when the membranes are stiff, when the cofactors are depleted, when the protein complexes are damaged and misaligned, the quantum dance falters. Tunneling becomes less efficient. Electrons leak from the chain, reacting with oxygen to form the very molecules that cause further damage. The coherence that allowed the system to function with such supernatural precision begins to break down. And the mitochondrion, once a radiant internal sun, dims to a flicker. This is not just a matter of feeling tired. This is a matter of time itself, because the efficiency of your mitochondrial quantum machinery does not merely determine how much energy you have on any given day. It determines the rate at which your cells accumulate damage, the rate at which your tissues age, the rate at which the biological systems that keep you alive slowly, imperceptibly, lose their capacity to maintain the coherence and precision that life demands. Every moment of inefficiency in the electron transport chain, every leaked electron, every molecule of oxidative damage that goes unrepaired is a tiny step along a trajectory that leads, eventually, inevitably, to the decline of the system as a whole. The quantum efficiency of your mitochondria is, in a very real sense, the clock by which your biological age is measured, not the number of years you have existed, but the degree to which your cellular engines have maintained their capacity to perform the ghostly, magnificent, impossible dance of electrons that keeps you alive. And that clock is not fixed. It is not predetermined. It can be slowed. It can, under the right conditions, even be turned back. Because the same evolutionary intelligence that built this quantum machinery in the first place, that learned to harness the noise of a living cell to sustain coherence against all odds, that refined the electron transport chain across 1 billion years of relentless optimization, also built into it the capacity for renewal, for repair, for the restoration of the very conditions that allow the quantum dance to resume its full, radiant precision. And it is toward that restoration, toward the reclaiming of the quantum fire that time and the modern world have conspired to diminish, that we now turn our attention. There is a clock inside you, not the kind you wear on your wrist or mount on a wall, not a mechanical device with gears and springs, ticking away the seconds in neat, predictable intervals. This clock has no face, no hands, no numbers marking the hours, and yet it is the most important timepiece you will ever possess, because it is not measuring the passage of time in the world around you. It is measuring the passage of time within you. It is counting down the minutes of your biological life, and it has been running since the moment you were born. This clock lives in your mitochondria, and tonight we are going to understand how it works, why it slows, and whether it is possible, truly possible, to wind it back. Every second of your existence, your mitochondria are doing far more than producing energy. They are reading the state of your cells. They are monitoring damage. They are assessing the balance between destruction and repair, between the forces that break biological structures down and the forces that build them back up. And based on that assessment, they are sending signals. Signals that ripple outward from the mitochondria into the nucleus of the cell, into the bloodstream, into the tissues and organs and systems that make up the totality of your physical being. These signals carry a message, and that message, in its simplest form, is this: how much time is left? How much capacity remains? How much longer this body can maintain the coherence and complexity that separates a living human being from the dust it will one day become? Scientists have begun to call this the longevity signal, and it is controlled, almost entirely, by the health and function of your mitochondrial engines. To understand how this clock works, you must first understand what happens inside a mitochondrion over time. Remember the electron transport chain, that quantum dance of particles tunneling through protein complexes to generate the energy of life. That process, as magnificent and precise as it is, comes with a cost. It is not perfectly clean. Even in the healthiest mitochondrion, operating under ideal conditions, a small percentage of the electrons moving through the transport chain escape. They leak from the chain and react with oxygen molecules in the surrounding environment, creating what are known as reactive oxygen species. Free radicals, unstable, highly reactive molecules that ricochet through the interior of the mitochondrion like sparks escaping a furnace. In small, controlled amounts, these reactive molecules are not just harmless, they are essential. They serve as signaling molecules, carrying information about the state of energy production to other parts of the cell. They trigger adaptive responses, the very hormetic pathways that once kept your ancestors strong and resilient. In the right dose, they are part of the system, part of the conversation between the mitochondrion and the cell it inhabits. But when the electron transport chain is stressed, when it is overburdened by poor fuel, disrupted by artificial signals, or degraded by chronic inflammation, the leak increases. What was once a controlled trickle becomes a steady stream, and those reactive oxygen species, no longer serving as precise signals, begin to cause damage. They strike the proteins of the electron transport chain itself, bending and breaking the very complexes through which electrons must tunnel. They oxidize the lipids of the mitochondrial membrane, making it stiffer, less responsive, less capable of maintaining the precise environment that quantum coherence requires. And most critically, most consequentially, they attack the mitochondrial DNA. Here is where the clock begins to tick louder. Remember that mitochondria carry their own DNA, that ancient, separate genome inherited from the free-living bacterium that was engulfed over 1 billion years ago. This DNA is small, circular, and remarkably efficient, encoding the essential components of the electron transport chain without a single wasted letter. But it is also vulnerable. Unlike the DNA in your cell nucleus, which is wrapped in protective proteins called histones and shielded by elaborate repair mechanisms, mitochondrial DNA sits exposed, unprotected, mere nanometers from the electron transport chain itself. It is, in effect, positioned directly next to the furnace. And when reactive oxygen species escape that furnace in excessive quantities, mitochondrial DNA is the first casualty. Each hit, each oxidative lesion, each mutation introduced into the mitochondrial genome degrades the instructions for building the components of the electron transport chain. A protein complex is assembled with a flaw. An enzyme folds incorrectly. A carrier molecule is produced in insufficient quantities, and the efficiency of the chain drops, not catastrophically, not all at once, but incrementally, a fraction of a percent here, a slight reduction in tunneling efficiency there. And because the chain is now slightly less efficient, it leaks slightly more electrons, which creates slightly more reactive oxygen species, which cause slightly more damage to the mitochondrial DNA, which produces slightly more flawed components, which reduces efficiency further still. This is the vicious cycle at the heart of biological aging, a self-reinforcing loop of damage and decline that begins so slowly it is imperceptible, but that compounds over years and decades into the visible, tangible, felt experience of growing old. Picture it as a master clockmaker's workshop. Imagine a vast room filled with the most intricate, most beautifully crafted timepieces ever assembled. Each one represents a mitochondrion, ticking in perfect synchrony, maintaining the rhythm of life with extraordinary precision. But in the air of this workshop, there is a fine, corrosive dust. And with each passing year, that dust settles on the mechanisms. It works its way into the gears. It dulls the surfaces. It introduces friction where there should be none. One by one, the clocks begin to slow. Their ticking becomes less precise. Their rhythms drift out of synchrony. The workshop, once filled with a unified, harmonious pulse, becomes a cacophony of discordant tempos, each clock falling behind at its own rate, each one losing time in its own way. And the master rhythm, the longevity signal that emerges from the collective function of all these timepieces working together, weakens, falters, fades. When the longevity signal weakens, the body receives a message. Not a conscious message, not something you can hear or articulate, but a deep, systemic, biological message that alters the behavior of cells throughout your entire organism. Stem cells, those reservoirs of regenerative potential that maintain and repair your tissues begin to slow their activity. Not because they are exhausted, but because the mitochondrial signal telling them to remain active has diminished. The immune system, dependent on enormous amounts of mitochondrial energy to maintain its vigilance and precision, begins to lose its accuracy, attacking the body's own tissues while allowing genuine threats to slip through unchecked. The brain, that insatiable consumer of mitochondrial output, begins to experience the cognitive decline that we have been taught to accept as an inevitable consequence of age, but that is, in truth, a consequence of dimming power. Memory weakens, focus scatters, the capacity for sustained, deep thought erodes, and the body, reading the weakening signal from its own mitochondria, begins to behave as if time is running out. Because, as far as the cells are concerned, it is. This is what aging is. Not the passage of calendar years, not the accumulation of birthdays. Aging is the progressive decline of mitochondrial function and the weakening of the longevity signal that mitochondria broadcast to every system in the body. Two people of the same chronological age can have vastly different biological ages, and the difference between them, the reason one moves with vitality while the other struggles with fatigue, the reason one thinks clearly while the other lives in fog, comes down, in large part, to the state of their mitochondrial engines, the quality of their quantum machinery, the integrity of their mitochondrial DNA, the strength of the signal those ancient organelles are sending to the rest of the body about how much capacity, how much resilience, how much time remains. But here is where the melancholy of this chapter turns towards something else, something that feels, in the quiet of this moment, like the first light appearing at the edge of a long, dark horizon. Because the cycle of mitochondrial decline, as relentless as it appears, is not inevitable. It is not written in stone. It is written in biology. And biology, unlike stone, can be rewritten. Researchers working at the frontier of mitochondrial science have discovered something that challenges the fatalistic narrative of aging that has dominated medicine for generations. They have found that the vicious cycle of oxidative damage and declining efficiency can be interrupted. That mitochondria retain, even in aged and damaged cells, the capacity for renewal. The process is called mitochondrial biogenesis, the creation of new mitochondria, fresh and undamaged, carrying clean copies of the mitochondrial genome, ready to take over from their degraded predecessors. And this process is not theoretical. It is happening inside you right now, albeit at a rate that may be far slower than it needs to be. Your body has not lost the ability to build new engines. It has lost the signal to do so at the rate that vitality demands. And beyond biogenesis, there is mitophagy, the selective destruction and recycling of damaged mitochondria, a quality control mechanism of extraordinary precision where the cell identifies mitochondria that have accumulated too much damage, that are leaking too many electrons, that are dragging down the efficiency of the entire network, and marks them for disassembly. Their components are broken down and reused. The damaged DNA is eliminated. The cellular space they occupied is cleared for fresh, functional replacements. It is a process of biological rebirth at the organelle level, a renewal of the very engines that determine how quickly or slowly the clock of your life is ticking. The implications of this are profound. If the rate of mitochondrial biogenesis can be increased and the rate of mitophagy can be optimized, the net effect is a cellular environment that grows younger, even as the calendar continues to advance. Not younger in a cosmetic sense, not younger in the superficial, external markers that society obsesses over. Younger in the most fundamental sense possible. Younger in the efficiency of the quantum dance. Younger in the integrity of the mitochondrial genome. Younger in the strength and clarity of the longevity signal that your mitochondria broadcast to every tissue, every organ, every system in your body. This is the biological rebirth that cutting-edge science is beginning to confirm is not only possible but achievable, not through drugs that mask symptoms, not through interventions that address consequences, but through the restoration of the conditions under which your mitochondria were designed to function, the conditions that trigger biogenesis, that activate mitophagy, that return the ancient engines to the state of clean, powerful, coherent operation that your ancestors enjoyed and that the modern world has disrupted. The clock is still ticking. It has never stopped. But the rate at which it ticks, the speed at which the hands move, the tempo of the rhythm that governs how much vitality you carry and how long that vitality endures, is not fixed. It is responsive. It is listening. It is waiting for signals that it recognizes, signals that it has responded to for over 1 billion years of evolutionary history, signals of challenge and recovery, of feast and fast, of light and darkness in their proper rhythm, of movement and stillness in their ancient balance. The longevity signal can be strengthened. The fading star at the center of your cells can be reignited. The clocks in the workshop can be cleaned, recalibrated, and set to tick once more with the precision and power they were built for. And the path to that reignition begins not with adding something new to your biology, but with reclaiming something old. Something encoded in the very DNA of the organelles that have kept life burning on this planet for longer than the continents have held their current shape. A genetic memory of vitality that has been suppressed but never erased. Dormant but never destroyed. Waiting in the ancient architecture of your cells for the moment you choose to wake it up. There is a process happening inside you at this very moment that you cannot feel, cannot see, and have almost certainly never been told about. It is older than medicine, older than language, older than the human species itself. It is a process so fundamental to the continuation of life that without it, every complex organism on this planet would have collapsed under the weight of its own accumulated damage millions of years ago. It is the body's original act of renewal, its deepest, most ancient ritual of self-repair. And it begins not with the addition of something new, but with the removal of something old. Tonight, as you lie here, as your breathing slows and your muscles release their grip on the tensions of the day, this process is preparing to activate. It has been waiting for you, waiting for this stillness, waiting for the signal that tells your cells it is finally safe to begin the work of rebuilding what the modern world has torn down. The process is called mitophagy. And to understand it, you must first let go of the idea that your body heals by simply producing more cells, more proteins, more energy. That is only half the story, and it is not the half that matters most tonight. The deeper truth, the one that biology has encoded into the operating system of every complex cell on Earth, is that true renewal begins with destruction, selective, precise, intelligent destruction, the identification and elimination of the components that are no longer serving you, the clearing away of the damaged, the dysfunctional, the broken, to make space for something clean and vital and new. Think of a garden in late autumn. The growing season has ended, the leaves have fallen, the stems have withered, and a gardener moves through the rows, not planting, not watering, but pruning, cutting back the dead wood, removing the decaying matter that, if left in place, would breed disease and choke the soil. To an untrained eye, the garden looks diminished, reduced, but the gardener knows something that the casual observer does not. Every cut is an act of faith in what is coming. Every removal creates space for a root system to consolidate its strength, to draw nutrients back into itself, to prepare for the explosive growth that spring will demand. The pruning is not the opposite of growth. It is the precondition for it. This is what mitophagy does inside your cells. It is the gardener of your mitochondrial network. It moves through the population of organelles within each cell, assessing, evaluating, identifying the mitochondria that have accumulated too much damage to function efficiently. The ones whose membranes have stiffened, whose electron transport chains are leaking, excessive reactive oxygen species, whose DNA has been mutated beyond the threshold of reliable energy production. These damaged mitochondria are not merely underperforming. They are actively harmful. They are consuming resources without producing adequate returns. They are generating oxidative stress that damages their neighbors. They are broadcasting distorted signals that confuse the cell's regulatory systems and contribute to the chronic inflammation that drives biological aging. They are, in the language of the body's deepest intelligence, no longer serving the collective, and mitophagy is the mechanism by which they are identified, isolated, engulfed, and disassembled. Their components broken down into raw materials, their damaged DNA eliminated, their space within the cell cleared and made available for something better. But here is what makes this process so remarkable, so worthy of the awe that this moment deserves. Mitophagy is not random. It is not a blunt force that destroys mitochondria indiscriminately. It is surgical. It reads molecular markers on the surface of each mitochondrion, markers that indicate the organelle's functional status, its membrane potential, its level of accumulated damage. Healthy mitochondria display signals that say, "Leave me, I am still contributing." Damaged mitochondria lose these protective signals and begin displaying others that say, "I am compromised, recycle me." The system is a quality control mechanism of breathtaking sophistication, honed by over 1 billion years of evolutionary pressure, designed to ensure that the mitochondrial network within each cell remains as clean, as efficient, as powerful as the raw materials available will allow. And when does this process reach its peak? When does the gardener do its deepest, most thorough work? The answer is one you already know, even if you have never framed it in these terms. It happens during sleep. Deep sleep, the slow, restorative phases of unconsciousness where your brain waves descend into the long, rolling rhythms of delta activity and your body enters a state of profound metabolic quiet. This is not coincidence. This is architecture. This is design refined across deep time because mitophagy requires resources. It requires energy. It requires the cell's attention to be turned inward, away from the demands of waking life, away from movement and thought and the processing of external stimuli, and directed entirely toward the internal work of assessment and renewal. During the day, your cells are busy. They are producing energy for your muscles, your brain, your immune system, your sensory organs. The machinery of mitophagy is suppressed, held in check, because the cell cannot simultaneously run at full external output and conduct deep internal maintenance. It is one or the other. And for most of human evolutionary history, the division was clean and reliable. Days were for output, nights were for repair. But this is where the modern world has inflicted perhaps its most insidious damage. Because the deep sleep that mitophagy requires, the true, uninterrupted, neurologically complete slow-wave sleep that allows the cell to fully shift from production to maintenance, has become one of the rarest experiences in modern human life. The blue light that floods your evenings delays the onset of melatonin, the hormone that signals the brain to descend into the deepest phases of sleep. The cortisol that lingers from a day of chronic digital stress keeps your nervous system hovering in a state of shallow vigilance, preventing the full neurological surrender that delta sleep demands. The noise, both literal and electromagnetic, that permeates your sleeping environment keeps the brain partially activated, cycling through lighter sleep stages that provide some rest but deny the cells the deep, sustained quiet. They need to conduct thorough, mitophagic maintenance. Night after night, the gardener arrives at the gate but is never given enough time, enough silence, enough stillness to complete its work. The damaged mitochondria accumulate. The network degrades. The engines that should be cleaned and renewed with each sleep cycle carry their damage forward into the next day, and the next, and the next, compounding the decline with every incomplete night of rest. But tonight is different. Tonight, you are here. Tonight, the noise is falling away. The screens are dark. The stimulation has ceased. And your body, feeling the absence of the signals that have kept it locked in shallow, incomplete recovery for so long, is beginning to respond. You may not feel it yet. It happens below the threshold of conscious awareness. But deep inside your cells, the molecular markers are shifting. The machinery of mitophagy is warming up. The gardener is picking up its tools, and as your brain descends through the stages of sleep, moving from the light, transitional phases into the deep, slow, powerful rhythms of true restorative rest, a signal will be sent to your mitochondrial network, a signal that says it is safe, it is quiet, it is time. And this is where the second half of the renewal begins. Because mitophagy, the removal of the damaged, is only the clearing of the ground. What follows is the planting, the building, the creation of new mitochondria to fill the space that has been opened. This process, mitochondrial biogenesis, is the body's way of manufacturing fresh engines, clean, undamaged, carrying intact copies of the mitochondrial genome, assembled with the full precision that 1 billion years of evolutionary refinement has encoded into the process. And biogenesis, like mitophagy, is triggered by signals that your body has been starved of, signals that tonight, in this stillness, in this descent into genuine rest, are beginning to flow again. There is a protein at the center of this process, a master regulator that scientists call PGC-1-alpha. Think of it as the architect of mitochondrial renewal. When activated, it initiates a cascade of genetic instructions that lead to the construction of new mitochondria from scratch, new membranes assembled from the lipids available in the cellular environment, new electron transport chain complexes folded and positioned with atomic precision. new copies of mitochondrial DNA, transcribed and installed in the matrix of each fresh organelle. The activation of PGC1 alpha is the body's declaration that it is time to rebuild, that the old, damaged engines are being cleared and new ones must take their place. And what activates this master architect? The very conditions that your ancestors experienced every single day and that the modern world has systematically eliminated. The metabolic signals of physical exertion followed by deep recovery, the hormonal cascades triggered by genuine cold exposure, the cellular chemistry of fasting, where the absence of incoming fuel forces the cell to optimize its existing machinery and build new capacity for the scarcity it perceives. And above all, the profound, uninterrupted physiological restoration of deep sleep. Tonight, as you rest, as the noise of the 21st century fades and your biology remembers what silence feels like, these pathways are opening. The damaged mitochondria are being tagged and removed. The raw materials are being gathered. The architect is being called to the drafting table, and new engines, fresh and clean and precise, are beginning to be built inside your cells. You are not merely sleeping, you are being rebuilt, molecule by molecule, organelle by organelle, in a process so intricate, so elegant, so deeply intelligent that it makes the most advanced manufacturing systems ever devised by human civilization look like crude sketches by comparison. And here is the revelation that changes everything. The capacity for this renewal is not small, it is not marginal. The vast majority of your mitochondrial potential is currently dormant, sleeping, suppressed by the chronic, unresolved signals of a world that never lets your cells rest long enough to access their full regenerative power. You have been living on a fraction of your biological capacity, not because your body lacks the ability to produce more, but because it has never been given the sustained, genuine, deep permission to do so. The engines are there, the blueprints are there, the raw materials are there. What has been missing is the signal, the sustained absence of noise, the deep, true rest that tells your cells it is safe to stop defending and start rebuilding. You are giving that signal now, with every slow breath, with every degree your muscles release their tension, with every layer of waking consciousness that dissolves as you descend toward the deepest chambers of sleep. You are sending a message to trillions of cells, and in those cells, to quadrillions of mitochondria. The message is simple, it is ancient, and it is the most powerful command your biology knows how to receive. Rebuild, renew, reclaim. Picture what is happening inside you as a tide, not a sudden flood, but a slow, rising tide, the kind that comes in so gradually you do not notice the water climbing until it has transformed the entire landscape. The damaged mitochondria are being cleared like debris from a shoreline. Fresh ones are emerging in their place, clean membranes gleaming with the molecular precision of new construction, electron transport chains assembled and aligned, ready to conduct the quantum dance of energy production with an efficiency you may not have experienced in years or decades. The tide is rising, and as it rises, the energy it carries begins to spread out from the mitochondria, into the cell, from cell to cell, from tissue to tissue. A current of renewed vitality flowing through pathways that have been dim for so long you may have forgotten they existed. And as this rising tide of fresh mitochondrial energy reaches a critical threshold, something begins to happen that transcends the individual organelle, that transcends the individual cell. The newly built mitochondria do not operate in isolation. They synchronize, they communicate. They begin to produce ATP in rhythms that align with each other, that resonate across the cellular network, that build into something larger and more powerful than any single engine could generate alone. The energy production of your body begins to shift from the discordant, flickering output of a damaged and depleted network to something coherent, something unified, something that your cells recognize at the deepest level of their evolutionary memory as the signature of a healthy, vital, fully operational biological system, a harmony of energy production that flows through every tissue and every organ, rebuilding the foundation of vitality from the inside out, restoring the rhythm that once powered the extraordinary endurance and clarity of those who came before you. A rhythm that is beginning, even now, as you lie in this healing stillness, to reassemble itself inside you. Something is stirring inside you now. You may not be able to name it. You may not yet feel it as a sensation you can locate or describe. But deep beneath the surface of your awareness, in the microscopic architecture of your cells, a shift has begun. The damaged engines have been identified and marked for removal. Fresh mitochondria, clean and precisely assembled, are emerging in their place. And as these new engines come online, as their electron transport chains begin to hum with the quantum precision of systems unburdened by accumulated damage, they are producing something. A molecule so fundamental to your existence that without it, every process in your body would halt within seconds. Every thought would dissolve, every heartbeat would cease, every nerve would go silent, every muscle would freeze in place. This molecule is adenosine triphosphate, ATP. And what is beginning to happen inside you right now, as your body descends deeper into this restorative stillness, is nothing less than the reawakening of its production on a scale your cells may not have experienced in a very long time. ATP is not merely fuel. That word, fuel, is too crude, too simple, too mechanical to capture what this molecule truly is. Fuel is something you pour into a machine and burn. ATP is something far more elegant. It is a carrier of potential, a vessel of organized energy so precisely calibrated that it can power the gross contraction of a muscle fiber with the same currency it uses to open a single ion channel in the membrane of a neuron. It is the universal language of biological action. Every living cell on this planet, from the simplest bacterium to the most complex neuron in your cerebral cortex, speaks this language. Every biological event you have ever experienced, every thought, every emotion, every perception, every dream has been paid for in ATP. When you blink your eyes, ATP is spent. When you breathe, ATP is spent. When your immune cells identify and destroy an invading pathogen, ATP is spent. When your hippocampus consolidates a memory during sleep, when your prefrontal cortex weighs a difficult decision, when your heart contracts with the precise force needed to push blood through 70,000 miles of blood vessels, ATP is spent. It is the single universal denomination of biological work, and your body produces and consumes roughly your own body weight in ATP every single day. Not over a lifetime, every day. A river of molecular energy so vast, so continuous, so essential that even a momentary interruption in its flow would be catastrophic. And here is what matters tonight. The quality of that flow, the precision of its timing, the harmony of its distribution throughout your body depends entirely on the state of the mitochondria that produce it. When your mitochondria are damaged, depleted, and struggling under the accumulated stress of the modern world, ATP production becomes erratic, uneven, disordered. Some cells receive too much, too quickly, a surge of energy that the cell's regulatory systems must scramble to contain, creating a state of hyperactivation, of overstimulation, of the kind of jittering, restless, anxious energy that keeps your mind racing at 3 in the morning when every part of you wants to rest. Other cells receive too little, starved of the ATP they need to perform their essential functions, dropping into a state of underperformance that manifests as fog, as numbness, as the heavy, leaden feeling of a body and mind that cannot seem to generate enough momentum to engage with life. This is the energetic chaos of a compromised mitochondrial network, surges and blackouts, spikes and crashes, a power grid in disarray, sending too much current to some districts while leaving others in the dark. But when mitochondria are healthy, when they are clean and numerous and operating with the quantum efficiency they were designed for, something entirely different emerges. ATP production becomes coordinated, synchronized. Each mitochondrion in each cell producing energy in rhythm with the demands being placed upon it. Not too much, not too little, but precisely the amount needed at precisely the moment it is required. And when this happens across trillions of cells simultaneously, when the mitochondrial network of the entire body achieves this state of coordinated, demand-matched energy production, the result is not merely adequate power. The result is a symphony. Imagine a grand orchestra, not a small ensemble, but a full, vast orchestra of thousands of instruments, each one representing a different cell in your body, each one requiring its own specific supply of energy to produce its unique contribution. The neurons of your brain are the violins, intricate and demanding, consuming vast amounts of ATP to maintain the electrochemical gradients that allow thought and perception and consciousness itself to exist. Your brain, weighing roughly 3 pounds, uses approximately 20% of your entire body's ATP production, 1/5 of all the energy you generate, devoted to an organ that represents barely 2% of your mass. The violins are expensive, they are demanding, and they are essential, because without them, the symphony has no melody. Your heart is the percussion, the deep, steady, relentless rhythm section that never stops, that cannot stop, that beats 100,000 times each day, each contraction powered by a surge of ATP so precisely timed that the muscle fibers of the cardiac wall contract in a wave, not all at once, but in a sequence that produces the elegant, efficient pumping action that moves 5 liters of blood through your body every minute. The cells of the heart are the most mitochondria-dense cells in your entire body. Up to 40% of their internal volume is occupied by mitochondria. They are, in the most literal sense, more engine than cell, because the heart cannot afford to miss a beat, cannot afford a power fluctuation, cannot afford the slightest interruption in ATP supply. The percussion must be perfect, always. Your immune cells are the brass section, bold, powerful, capable of extraordinary bursts of energy when called upon to defend the body against invasion. A single immune cell, when activated, can increase its ATP consumption by orders of magnitude within hours, fueling the rapid production of antibodies, the deployment of inflammatory mediators, the relentless pursuit and destruction of pathogens. But this power must be controlled, must be precisely regulated, because an immune system that fires without coordination, that surges when it should hold steady, that sustains its attack beyond the point of necessity, becomes a source of destruction rather than protection. Autoimmune conditions, chronic inflammation, the slow erosion of healthy tissue by a defense system that has lost its sense of proportion. These are the consequences of an immune brass section playing too loud, too long, drowning out the rest of the orchestra. And throughout the body, in every tissue and every organ, other instruments contribute their voices. The liver, metabolizing and detoxifying with a quiet, ceaseless diligence that demands a constant, steady supply of ATP. The kidneys, filtering blood and maintaining the precise chemical balance of your internal environment. Their cells packed with mitochondria to sustain the enormous energetic cost of this work. The muscles, capable of both the sustained, low-level output of maintaining posture and the explosive, high-energy discharge of sudden movement. The gut, processing and absorbing nutrients while maintaining the integrity of a barrier that separates the interior of your body from the outside world. Every one of these systems is an instrument in the symphony. Every one requires ATP in specific quantities, at specific times, in specific rhythms. And the conductor of this symphony, the intelligence that coordinates this unimaginably complex distribution of energy across 100 trillion cells, is the mitochondrial network itself. When the network is healthy, the symphony plays, not in the metaphorical sense, in the actual, measurable, physiological sense. The brain receives the ATP it needs to maintain stable, coherent neural activity, the kind that produces clear thought, emotional equilibrium, and the profound inner stillness that comes not from the absence of activity, but from the presence of perfectly balanced, perfectly sustained neurological function. A still mind is not an empty mind. A still mind is a mind whose mitochondria are producing ATP in such perfect harmony with its needs that there is no excess to create agitation and no deficit to create fog. It is the neurological equivalent of a perfectly tuned instrument producing a clear, sustained, unwavering tone. The heart receives the ATP it needs to beat with the effortless, powerful, metronomic precision that sends blood flowing through your vessels in smooth, laminar waves rather than turbulent, irregular surges. You feel this as a sense of calm in your chest, a feeling of steadiness that is not the absence of feeling but the presence of a rhythm so reliable, so deeply integrated into your body's functioning that it becomes a foundation upon which everything else rests. The immune system receives what it needs to maintain vigilance without hyperactivation, to patrol without attacking, to respond to genuine threats with decisive force, and then stand down completely and cleanly when the threat has passed. You feel this as resilience, as the quiet confidence of a body that knows it can handle what comes without overreacting, without collapsing into the chronic inflammatory state that drains energy and accelerates aging. And as this symphony reaches its full expression, as each section of the orchestra receives the ATP it needs, in the precise rhythm it requires, something emerges that is greater than the sum of its parts. A state of being that your ancestors would have recognized instantly, but that we, in our depleted, brown-out, dimmed modern existence, have almost forgotten is possible. It is the feeling of being fully, completely, effortlessly alive, not wired, not stimulated, not running on the borrowed energy of caffeine or adrenaline, or the desperate, flickering output of damaged mitochondria, struggling to meet demands they cannot sustain, but powered, genuinely, deeply, sustainably powered, from the inside, from the source, from the ancient engines running as they were designed to run, producing the molecule that makes all of life possible in a rhythm so harmonious that the entire body resonates with it, like a tuning fork struck with perfect force. This is what is being rebuilt inside you tonight. This is what the clearing of the damaged engines and the construction of new ones is leading toward. Not just more energy, but better energy, coordinated energy. Energy that flows where it is needed, when it is needed, in the exact amount required, and then subsides gracefully to allow the next wave to form. The ATP symphony is not something you have to learn. It is not something you have to create through effort or willpower. It is something your body already knows how to produce. It is encoded in the evolutionary architecture of your mitochondria, in the quantum coherence of their electron transport chains, in the billion-year-old intelligence that governs the relationship between these ancient engines and the cells they inhabit. All that was needed was the space, the silence, the deep, genuine rest that allows the damage to be cleared and the new to emerge. And that space is here. That silence is now. And the symphony, note by note, instrument by instrument, is beginning to play. Feel it as a warmth. Not the warmth of external heat, but the warmth of internal generation. The radiant signature of ATP being produced in quantities and rhythms your cells have been starving for. Feel it spreading from your core, from the dense mitochondrial furnaces of your heart and liver, outward through your bloodstream, carried by the hemoglobin that delivers oxygen to feed the engines, reaching your limbs, your fingers, your toes, the surface of your skin. Feel it rising into your brain, where the neurons, those magnificent, hungry instruments, are receiving the clean, steady, precisely calibrated energy they need to settle into coherence, to stop flickering, to stop surging and crashing, to find the deep, sustained, harmonious tone of a mind fully powered and fully at rest. This warmth, this rising tide of coordinated energy is not the end of the journey, it is the threshold. Because as the ATP symphony reaches its full resonance, as the body remembers what it feels like to be powered by engines running clean and true, something deeper begins to stir, something that goes beyond the chemistry of individual molecules and the function of individual cells. A connection to the fundamental energy that has animated every living thing since that first ancient partnership was formed in the waters of a young planet. A spark that is not merely biological, but elemental, not merely personal, but universal. The same spark that has passed from cell to cell, from organism to organism, from generation to generation, in an unbroken chain of living fire that stretches from the origin of complex life to this exact moment, this exact breath, this exact beat of your heart in the quiet dark. And it is toward that spark, toward the source of the fire itself, that we now gently, irresistibly begin to turn. You have traveled so far tonight, from the ancient oceans where life first discovered partnership, through the vast landscapes where your ancestors carried a fire in their cells that made them extraordinary, through the dimming grid of the modern body and the quantum dance of electrons ghosting through barriers they should not be able to cross. You have witnessed the clock of your biology and understood that its hands can be moved. You have felt the gardener begin its work, clearing the damaged and making space for the new. You have heard the first notes of a symphony assembling itself inside you, instrument by instrument, cell by cell, a rising tide of coordinated energy spreading through your body like warmth, returning to a landscape after a long, cold night. And now, at last, we arrive at the deepest chamber of this journey, the place where biology meets something larger, where the fire inside your cells reveals itself to be not merely a product of chemistry, but a continuation of something that has been burning since before this planet, before this solar system, before the first atoms were forged in the hearts of the earliest stars. Let your body be completely still now. Let whatever remains of your waking tension dissolve. Let the weight of your limbs become something you no longer need to carry, as if the surface beneath you is absorbing it, taking it from you, returning you to a state of weightlessness that your body remembers from before you were born. Because what we are about to explore requires no effort, no concentration, no grasping. It asks only that you let go, completely, utterly. The way a leaf lets go of a branch in autumn and discovers that falling is not loss, but release. Consider where the energy inside you actually comes from, not the immediate source, not the ATP forged in your mitochondria, not the electrons tunneling through protein complexes, not the oxygen you breathe or the food you consume. Go further back. Follow the chain to its origin. The food you eat grew in sunlight. Plants captured photons, particles of light that traveled 93 million miles from the surface of the sun, and used that light to build the molecular structures that eventually became your fuel. The oxygen you breathe was produced by those same plants and by the cyanobacteria before them, organisms that learned to split water molecules using solar energy, releasing oxygen as a byproduct of their own light-powered chemistry. The sun itself, that enormous furnace that has sustained life on this planet for over 4 billion years, generates its energy through nuclear fusion, the merging of hydrogen atoms under pressures and temperatures so extreme that matter itself is transformed into energy, according to the most famous equation in physics. And those hydrogen atoms, the raw fuel of the sun, where did they come from? They were forged in the first minutes after the birth of the universe, in the initial cooling of a cosmos so young that no star had yet ignited, no galaxy had yet formed, no planet had yet coalesced from the swirling dust of creation. The hydrogen that burns in the sun, that powers the plants, that feeds your body, that is consumed by your mitochondria to produce the ATP that sustains your consciousness at this very moment, is among the oldest matter in existence. It has been here since the beginning, since before there was a here to be, and the energy that those hydrogen atoms carry, the energy that is released when they fuse, that travels as light across the void, that is captured by chlorophyll and stored in the bonds of glucose and delivered to your mitochondria and converted into the electrochemical potential that powers your thoughts. That energy cannot be created. It cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed. This is not philosophy. This is the first law of thermodynamics, one of the most fundamental, most rigorously tested, most universally confirmed principles in all of science. Energy is neither born nor does it die. It changes form. It flows from one state to another, from light to chemistry to electricity to heat to motion. But the total amount of energy in the universe remains constant, unchanged, eternal. The energy inside you right now is eternal, not in a metaphorical sense, not as a comforting abstraction, in the most literal, physical, scientifically verifiable sense possible. The energy that your mitochondria are producing at this moment has existed in one form or another since the origin of the universe. It was present at the beginning. It has passed through stars, through supernovae, through the formation of planets, through the first oceans, through the first cells, through every generation of every living thing that has ever existed on this world. And it is here now, inside you, taking the form of ATP, of electrochemical gradients, of the quantum movements of electrons through the oldest biological machinery on Earth. You are not merely using energy, you are participating in a flow of energy that is as old as time itself. A river that has no beginning and no end, only an endless series of transformations. And you, in this moment, are one of those transformations. A temporary, exquisite, conscious eddy in the eternal current of the cosmos. Let that understanding wash through you like a wave, not as an idea to be grasped, but as a feeling to be experienced. You are not separate from the energy of the universe. You have never been separate. The boundary you feel between yourself and the world, the sense of being a contained, isolated entity looking out at an external reality, is a useful illusion maintained by your nervous system for the purposes of survival. But at the level of energy, at the level of the electrons moving through your mitochondria and the photons that powered the food chain that feeds them, and the nuclear reactions that created the photons and the primordial forces that created the atoms that fuel those reactions, there is no boundary. There is only flow, only transformation, only the endless, seamless movement of energy from one form to another, from star to sunlight to sugar to cell to thought to heat to radiation and back again, in a cycle so vast, so complete, so fundamentally unified that the idea of separation becomes, at this depth, meaningless. And it is here, in this understanding, in this felt experience of unity with the energetic fabric of existence, that the deepest healing becomes possible. Not because the understanding itself is medicine, but because the state it produces in your body, the state of complete release, of total surrender, of the profound neurological and physiological calm that emerges when the mind stops struggling against reality and simply rests within it, is the state in which your biology performs its most extraordinary work. Scientists have measured this. They have observed that in states of deep meditation, in the deepest phases of restorative sleep, in moments where the brain's default mode network, the system responsible for maintaining the narrative of the self, quiets to a whisper, the body enters a mode of repair and regeneration that exceeds anything achievable in ordinary rest. Inflammation drops, immune function optimizes, hormonal balance restores, and mitochondrial function, the foundation upon which all of this depends, reaches its peak efficiency. Not because the mitochondria are working harder, but because the body has finally stopped interfering with their work. The noise has ceased. The false alarms have stopped. The chronic, low-grade emergency that has kept the cellular engines locked in defensive mode has, at last, been resolved. And the mitochondria, freed from the burden of perpetual vigilance, return to what they do best. They produce energy, cleanly, powerfully, in perfect rhythm, in perfect coherence, in the quantum symphony that your biology has spent over 1 billion years learning to play. This is sovereign stillness, not the stillness of absence, not the stillness of emptiness or numbness or withdrawal from life, but the stillness of a system in perfect equilibrium. A stillness so full, so complete, so saturated with balanced energy that it becomes its own kind of power. The stillness of a deep lake whose surface is so calm it becomes a perfect mirror. The stillness of a tuning fork that has finished vibrating and now holds its tone in pure, unmoving resonance. The stillness of a heart that beats not because it is struggling to keep up, but because it is resting in the effortless rhythm of an engine running exactly as it was designed to run. This is the state your body is moving toward tonight, with every breath, with every moment of deepening rest, with every layer of tension and resistance and waking identity that dissolves as you sink further into the quiet. Feel your breath now, not as something you are doing, but as something that is happening. Feel the air entering your lungs not as an act of will, but as a natural, inevitable movement, like the tide responding to the pull of the moon. Your breath is synchronizing with the rhythm of your mitochondria. Your heartbeat is synchronizing with the rhythm of your breath. And your mitochondria, those ancient engines, those internal suns, are synchronizing with something older and deeper still. The rhythm of the energy that flows through all things. The pulse that was present at the birth of the cosmos and that has never, not for a single instant, ceased. You are not falling asleep. You are falling inward, toward the center, toward the source, toward the place where the mitochondrial fire in your cells meets the universal fire that burns in everything. And as you arrive there, as you let the last edges of your waking self soften and blur and finally dissolve into the warm, luminous quiet of this deepest rest, know that the spark inside you is safe. It has always been safe. It has survived the death of stars. It has survived the collision of worlds. It has survived ice ages and extinctions and the relentless grinding of deep time. It has been carried in the cells of your mother and her mother and her mother before her, in an unbroken chain of living light, stretching back through every ancestor you have ever had, and beyond them to the first cell that ever harbored this fire, and beyond that to the star that provided the energy, and beyond that to the forces that shaped the star from the raw fabric of a newborn universe. That spark is you, not your name, not your story, not the accumulation of memories and preferences and anxieties that constitute the self you carry through your waking hours. Beneath all of that, before all of that, there is this, a flame that does not flicker, a light that does not fade, an energy that was never born and will never die, only transform endlessly, beautifully, from one expression of existence to the next. Let yourself rest in it now. Let the spark hold you the way it has always held you, since before you were aware of it, since before you had words to describe it, since before you had a mind to question it. It does not need your attention to continue burning. It does not need your effort to sustain itself. It has been sustaining itself for 13.8 billion years without your help. All it needs, all it has ever needed, is for you to stop resisting it, to stop running from it, to stop burying it under the noise and the speed and the relentless demands of a world that has forgotten what it means to be still. You are still now. You are resting in the oldest fire in the universe. Your mitochondria are humming in the quiet dark, producing the energy of life with a rhythm that has not been interrupted since the first complex cell discovered the power of partnership in an ancient, sunless sea. The reset is complete. The engines are clean. The symphony is playing. And you, the conscious expression of an eternal energy that chose, for this brief and precious moment, to take the form of a human life, are exactly where you are supposed to be. Let go now, completely. The spark will carry you through the night. It always has. It always will. Close your eyes and return to the source. The journey is complete, and the light inside you burns on,